I always had a good relationship with Dennis Desmond, stayed in touch with him. And he rang me and said, do you want to buy Hammersmith Apollo and the Forum? Because the Competition Commission are making us sell 2 venues in order for us to buy the Academy Music Group. So Academy wasn't part of Live Nation at the time. So we want to sell one of Hammersmith Apollo, Brixton Academy, and one of Shepherd's Bush Empire and the Forum, because they're the same caps. 5,000 cap with no seats in Hammersmith, 2,000 and a bit to 2,500 to 250 probably in both the other 2 venues. And of course, when we first looked at it, we were like, well, we'd quite like to have Brixton Academy and Shepherd's Bush Empire. And it was pretty apparent that they weren't really for sale, that they wanted us to buy the Apollo and the Forum. And we'd owned the Forum and the Mean Fiddler, so I knew the venue pretty well, so there was no fears there. But Hammersmith Apollo was different. It was like, what is that venue? It's not a rock and roll venue. Is it a theatre venue? Is it a theatre? Is it a rock and roll? But the more we looked at it, the more we liked it, because it was so, a key factor in any, running a venue is an arithmetical equation. It's utilization, how many times you're open, average attendance, because you don't want to be open to 2 people, spend per head, how much money can you take out of their pockets when they're there, and your gross profit margins, how you manage those, which is your management team. And running a venue is pulling one of those levers. There's usually one lever that's going wrong with one of them. And by and large, it's the utilization. So we looked at Hammersmith. Utilization was great. Average attendance was great. 600,000 people a year went through the doors of that place. But the spend per head was £3.03. And that's what we zoned in on. So we did, long story short, we did a deal very quickly with Dennis and Live Nation. Paul Latham was there at the time. He was great in helping us get that done. We raised 20 million quid with our shareholders to do it, because we didn't have a problem raising money, because they liked us, and we'd kept them in touch, and we'd nearly done Sanctuary. We got a lot of publicity for that. And I think a lot of kudos for not doing that deal, saying no to deals, So it was a quick deal. We did it in March 2007. So it took 3 months from first phone call to actually signing on the dotted line.
Wow. What was the process when you speak to the investors? Are you doing a pitch, a presentation?
You start off with a presentation and a pitch, and then, once we did that and raised the first money, we just used to go and have a cup of tea with them. Get a cup of tea, or Andy Bruff, one of the investors, we used to go and have a bacon sandwich with him in Smith's, which was hard because it was 7 a.m. and you don't really get to bed very early in the music business, as you know. But by the time we'd got to the Hammersmith Apollo deal, it was one phone call. This is, we said we'd do a bigger deal. We said we'd want another check. This is it. Can you give us 4 million quid? And I think 3 or 4 of them put 4 million quid in, and then we went and got the other 4 from somewhere else. But I think the clever thing we did on that, it was an auction process, right? So Hammersmith Apollo, like Bill Kenwright was in for it, Mint Group were in for it, AEG were in for it. So we weren't favourites to do that. But because I knew Dennis and I knew what deal we'd done with the Mean Fiddler, I knew that he'd taken on GAY, Borderline, Jazz Cafe, Garage, and obviously the Mean Fiddler in Harleston. And I didn't think he really wanted them, because it wasn't core to what he wanted to do. They were just about to take on the Academy Music Group, and they had the festivals. That's enough of a core business for anyone. So I said to him that we would give him 20 million quid, because that's what he wanted, but we want the other assets thrown in as well. And you can split the consideration any which way you want, like 14.6, 13.7, 13.5, 6.5. Whereas everyone else was like, what's it worth? 13.21564, So we won the auction, because it basically was like, we'll give you 20 million quid, and no one else was paying 20 million quid for the Forum and the Apollo. But we were also getting the other assets that we really thought we could sweat and were more core to our business and more relevant to our business, because medium size was perfect for us. So anything that scared us was that Hammersmith was so big, and we'd never run a venue of that size before. 2,000 in my experience then, didn't run the Astoria. And Barflies was 600, the biggest one. 200 more, sort of most of them, 250. And the day that we went and with the new owners and we went in and sort of, didn't get the best reception in the world because we rock up in, Clubland and they're theatre employees, wearing suits and ties who sort of want something a bit more, And as we walked away to the station, I think Adam said to me, he said, mate, do you think we made a mistake here? We think we're going to end up with egg on our faces? Because it was high profile. And I was like, mate, your dad was a pound shop trader before he wrote a children's book and, became successful. And my dad was a plumber, plumbing shops. And we were brought up that way. If we can't do better than £3 and 3p, then we won't shoot in. Because I'll stand there myself and sell them things, So the whole thing was like, right, you run the venue the way you've always run it, because you've a way better job than us running barflies in terms of, procedures and policies. And we'll look after the commercial side. And, so we'll change a bar from a popcorn bar into a beer bar. Try and get people in the venue earlier. So say you've got to pick your ticket up at 7, otherwise you can't pick it up. So then you're in there drinking for an hour before the show starts and you're not in a pub down the road. Simple things, but Vegas does it perfectly. Vegas gets you into venues, sells you things. That's where they make all their money.
Yeah.
So it was like, can we negotiate an interval with the artist? Because there wasn't a bar in the auditorium. For rock gigs, put a bar in the auditorium so people can drink when Kings of Leon are playing. Obviously, they're not going to drink in there when Jimmy Carr is playing because you don't want people getting out of their seats. And then, staff rooms turned into sandwich bars. Yeah, all sorts of things that we could do to make more spend per head than we were making. And I think when we sold it for 3 times more than we paid for it, we were doing about £7, £6.73, I think it was, spend per head, which still isn't, amazing, but it was a lot better than £3.
When was that roughly?
We bought it in March 2007. We actually took the keys in June, but the deal was done in March. And we sold it, tap the table. We sold it in, I would say, May 2012 to AEG. It's a funny story because AEG were absolutely raging that they didn't get, and we'd beaten them in this auction pro. They couldn't figure out our little upstart business like Mama could beat them to an auction. So they rang us, and I got on. Rob Hallett was there at the time, and I got on well with Rob. And he said, "Can you come out and meet Tim Lewicki in Coachella to talk about Hammersmith Apollo?" And it's like, Coachella, I'd never been. Of course I can come. And we went out, and they picked us up from the hotel in a car and took us into the car park and put us in a golf buggy. And as we drove in, we were passing all the queue. Cameron Diaz was in the VIP queue, and we passed her, literally drove past her. And Adam and I were usually quite miserable, focused on business and numbers. We didn't take drugs. We didn't drink that much. We didn't party that much. And I looked at him and said, mate, we've got to enjoy this because we'll never be here ever again in our lives. We'll never be passing Cameron Diaz in a miniskirt in a queue. Because if they buy us, we'll be in that queue at best, the VIP queue. If they don't buy us, we'll never be invited again. So we went in and met Tim, and Coachella wasn't the monster that it is now in terms of backstage. It was just a couple of porta cabins. And we met Tim, and Tim's one of the nicest, smartest people in the music industry. He runs Oakview now. At the time, he was running AEG for Phil Anschutz, who owns it. And he was like, not quite sure how you've got Hammersmith Apollo, because we wanted that, because we're just about to open the O2. And we'd like Hammersmith to be west for comedians and O2 to be east for comedians. So you'd put a spoke on our wheel. Can we buy it off you? And it's like, well, everything's got a price, Tim. We hadn't even taken the keys. We took the keys in June. And we quoted him a price. And he was like, okay, that's fair enough. Bill, you do the legals. Alice, you do the numbers, all that sort of stuff. And then a strangled voice at the back of the caravan, some accountant. That's 3 times what they paid for it. And I remember Tim just looked at me with that twinkle in his eye, because like I said, he's the nicest man. And we were like, tell us the price. We're here to make money for our shareholders. So they declined. at that time. But then 5 years later, they bought it for that exact number, actually, when HMB owned us. So yeah, it was, one of the privileges of your life to be the custodian, which is what I call us. People used to say, oh, you own Hammersmith Apollo. I'd say we're the custodians of Hammersmith Apollo. Because if you think about its heritage, Bowie killed Ziggy Stardust on the stage in Hammersmith Odeon, as it was. Queen did one of their most famous film gigs in Hammersmith Odeon. The police drove a tank down the street and shut off the whole area when they were at the top of their game. So I had this amazing rock and roll history, and one of my favorite ever shows there was Mott the Hoople. Just rocking up to Mott the Hoople on a Wednesday night and seeing all of the girls there from the 70s, all of the groupies, fur coats, no knickers, like absolute hoot of rock and roll people in the green room from like relics of the 70s, but wonderful, wonderful people. As rock and roll is, the crowds that go to rock and roll gigs, I find some of the nicest people you'd ever meet in your life. You have a cup of tea with them with your mum.
Yeah.
So it was not my favorite. Jazz Cafe was my favorite, but close second. And a privilege to, be the custodians of that for, I think, the 6 years that we had it.
And did you say you got the Jazz Cafe as part of the deal?
Jazz Cafe was part of the deal. Adrian Gibson was promoting it at the time. Adrian's still out there promoting. But we wanted to take it in a different way. So, yeah, perfect for us, Jazz Cafe, 400 cap. Our promoters, our bookers struggled to compete with Live Nation at the top end. So we used to say, don't compete with them. Go in the mid-size venues. There's no rocket science in it. Don't compete with the Yankees. Because we used to call Live Nation the Yankees. That book and that film, Moneyball, it was knocking around. And I think there's a phrase in it, if you try and compete with the Yankees in here, you'll lose to the Yankees out there. So it was like, don't compete, be different. Be smaller, there's still a lot of money to be made in the mid-size. There was then. Mid-size venues, mid-size festivals.